This is part 2 of my interview with Rick Jones, who is now the senior assistant to Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri. In this episode, Coach tells us about how he continues to learn the game and some of the best ways he found to help his staff learn the game. He recommends some resources. I think what really comes through in this one is his thirst for knowledge, his thirst for learning, and how it is so important to him and how he's built his career. And I can tell you from a personal experience, he really does value this. I was consulting with a team in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we were just about to start that day. They had flown me in, and about 5 minutes before we were getting ready to go, Rick Jones walks through the door, pulls out a notebook, and sits down and said, "I heard you were talking ball here today, and I had to come and listen to this." And I, number one, was so blown away that he would take the time and drive, a few hours to come and see me. And number two, that he was sitting there to learn from me. It should have been the other way around, but he sat there and took notes the whole time. And that's just the kind of guy that Rick Jones is. He's going to continue to learn in this game, and that was something he shared with me when he took the job and stepped away from Greenwood, a place I know that he loved, is that he saw an opportunity to continue to learn and grow in the position that he was offered at Missouri. So part 2 of my interview with Rick Jones. Happy New Year to everybody, and we look forward to 2022.
There was something you mentioned in there, though, that I think would be of interest to our listeners that's more field-related, and you said that you grade finish, that you guys came up with a way to grade finish. Could you give us an example of that?
Yeah, I will. I'm not sure. I think this might be Randy Jackson. I borrow everything, and I sometimes don't remember where I borrow it, so I don't give proper credit where credit is due. But basically, what we try to do is we try to watch if a lineman has both hands on an opponent when the whistle blows, then that's it. Then that's a finish. Or he's chasing the ball. Mm-hmm. And defensive player has to either be on the ball or chasing the ball, or it's not a finish. Quarterbacks have to, if they hand the ball off, have to fake and run 5 yards down the field full speed, or pull one defender away from the ball by carrying out a fake. So that's the way that we do it. You have to be on the ball, headed toward the ball if you're on defense, and on offense you have to have two hands on on your defender or chasing the ball. And that's the way when we watch the film, that's how we graded the finishes. I just think that you got to have definitions for everything so that everybody's on the same page.
Coach, we're going to put the focus back on you a little bit here and talk about some of the things that you've grown through your experiences. So going back to the beginning again, what's a mistake you made as a young coach, and what did you learn from it?
Oh gosh. That is there's so many mistakes that it's hard to narrow it down. But I think that if I looked at anything, it would be really trying to focus too much on euphemistically focus too much on the X's and O's, and sometimes not enough on the Johnnies and Joes. I think that it's sort of an expectation now that we deal more with the kids and sort of get more involved and things like that. In the old days, it wasn't really like that. And I think if I look back at it, I just missed some great opportunities to impact some guys that I could have done a better job of that. I just think that it's I guess when you get older, you sort of look back at it. And I'm so lucky I got so many great relationships with former players, but I think if I could all do it over, I think it would even be more the same. I think that's a thing that is really a thing that when you look back at, everybody's going to, part of the things they'll say is like, well, what are they going to say at your funeral and things like that. And I guess when you sort of get closer to the end than you are at the finish, you probably spend more time thinking about some of that type of stuff. I think that I would just encourage young guys to really focus on the humans that you're coaching and have a sense of appreciation. Like I've talked about, they're willing to play football and have it, because it's an awesome sport. It's a wonderful sport. The other thing is that it's so much easier now to get information. I mean, I know that everybody else has mentioned it, but I mean, in the old days, you had one copy of the film, and it was film, it was just film. and you had one copy of the game and you didn't film practices, and then with the advent of, the VHS and all that, you could start doing and having multiple copies and things like that. There's so many great ways to learn the game. Just sit down and learn the game, and I think that's a huge thing. And it's been obviously, if somebody's ignorant about any aspect of football today, it's their own fault, because it's out there. The information's out there. What you're doing, what other guys are doing, it's amazing the amount of information that's out there. But I think if I had any, the mistakes that I made was I left some opportunities out to be an influence that I could have, and I could have, even in those days, I could have learned, I could have studied more. And I'm a student of the game. I'm always interested in a better, newer way to do something, but I think even at that, I could have done better in that area.
Coach, what's the best advice you've received in your career?
Oh, man, I've had so much great advice. I think the best advice I ever got, I went to my second head coach, Mike Little, and Mike was an awesome, awesome football coach there in the Oklahoma City area, very well respected, and I was so honored to just be on his staff. And I remember when he did a very informal evaluation at the end of the year, and I said, Coach, what can I do to get better? Because I was his offensive line coach and defensive line coach, and I always wanted to be the best coach I could be. I never really focused on a title or anything like that, like I mentioned before. I said, Mike, what can I do better? I'll never forget the conversation along the way. He said, Rick, you've got to look at the big picture. And what I'll never forget that conversation, that I was a line coach and I needed to make sure that I did everything possible to do a great job coaching the line. But Mike was telling me that I got to open up my blinders and my blinkers, and I got to see what's he telling the quarterback to do? How's he organizing practice? What's he doing in the kicking game? So I took that conversation in that I didn't want to lose focus of being the best offensive line coach I could be, but I need to scan out wider, not be so tunnel vision, and see the big picture. So I would tell a young guy, look at the big picture. Too many times we like offense, we don't mess with the defense, and I just think that's wrong. I think it's like going to a coaching clinic. I've gone to some of these coaching clinics where they have all different kinds of sports, and I'll go hear a basketball coach. Some of these basketball coaches are great coaches, and you can learn a lot from them, and a lot of them have a lot, football principles. Sherry Cole, the women's basketball coach at OU, I listened to her speak about 7 or 8 years ago, and I got an idea for what we do every day before practice now from listening to her. So I would say be wide open and learn from anybody and everybody.
For that young guy getting into it, his first year, looking to make it long-term in this profession, we mentioned some advice before, but what would you tell that guy is this is how you make it long-term?
The obvious thing is to not do stupid stuff, not be immature. Conduct yourself as a man. I would say learn and don't have a mentality that you can't learn something, and don't wait on somebody. The first coach I worked with did not like to go to clinics, and some coaches sat around and griped about the fact that he wouldn't pay for them to go to clinic, or he didn't like to go to clinics, and I just went to clinics. I wasn't going to let that stop me. I listened to your Jim McNally interview the other day, and it made me laugh because I figured out Jim was speaking at San Angelo, Texas in the summertime about 1987, and I just jumped in the car and drove down there to listen to Jim McNally. I wanted to learn how to run the zone play. And he is and still was sort of the guru of the zone play. And so I didn't worry about somebody reimbursing me for my money. And of course I didn't get married while I was 40 either. I got to throw that in to be fair. But I just jumped in my car and drove to San Angelo, Texas. And I wanted to listen to Jim McNally. And in San Angelo at the clinic, he speaks for an hour, then he does a breakout session. And I looked around at the breakout session. I'd been there a while, I knew, but I looked around and it was just Jim and I. And he said, hey, I know that he said something like, I'm going to the bar. If you want to follow me over there, that's fine. And so I just followed him over there, and I had my notebook. And he was so gracious and so nice because he's at the very pinnacle of his profession. And I'm I'm a high school coach from, Edmond, Oklahoma. And, but I mean, I'm not afraid to follow a guy around. I mean, probably 8 or 9 years ago, I go up to the University of Arkansas for their spring clinic. And I start talking pump protection with their special teams coach. He's now at Virginia Tech, James Shebest, and all of a sudden, it's 1:30 in the morning, and it's him and I. We're the only ones up there, like knuckleheads, and I'm embarrassed because there were several times I said, I got to go. I wasn't worried about my time, but I was worried about his. But just have a burning passion to get better and learn and to study. And you can't run out of stuff to learn. You're never going to get it right. We've never coached a perfect game. Maybe Nick Saban has, but I never have, and I'm a long way from it. But I'm still trying to get there after all these years.
Coach, what's a book you would recommend to our listeners? I know you mentioned Joe Ehrmann's stuff, but what's a book you would recommend to our listeners?
Oh my goodness, you gotta have that would be almost impossible. I'm gonna recommend a video, and you would know him being where you're from, but Tony Mason, Coaching Coaches, is the most life-changing video or clinic speech I've ever seen. He gave the clinic speech at Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence, Kansas in about 85, 86. And it's called Tony Mason Coaching Coaches. You can still get copies of it here and there. I really like that speech better than the one that he gave in Dallas. But he gave that speech all over the place. Tony has passed. But as a single source of information, I think it's the best and most influential thing that I've ever read or seen. Tony Mason, Coaching Coaches. And I know you're going to give him my contact information, and somebody since he's passed, I don't know that there's a way that you can get that video, but I'll loan you a copy. Because It's about every 3 years, our staff, we'll just sit down and watch it again. I've probably seen it 20 times. But it's just how to communicate with your coaches, and it is unbelievable. And I love books. I just inventoried my book that I have in my office, and it's like a small library. Because I'm just nuts about it. Some of the newer things that I've read are it's probably not new, but it's new to me, is Joshua Medcast stuff, Chop Wood, Carry Water, Burn Your Goals. I think if you're coaching today and you haven't read Generation IY by Tim Elmore, you ought to stop coaching. He discusses the kids that we're coaching and where their brains are and where they're coming from, and that generation of kids, because it just helps you have a great understanding of the kids. Randy Jackson's book, Culture Beats Strategy, his videos series as well is really, really good. The first two are just basically on culture, and I think Randy does a great job with that stuff. I was fortunate 2 years ago, I got to get my picture taken with my hero, Carol Dweck, who wrote the book Mindset. I scared the poor woman to death. It's a long story, but we were in a banquet setting, and they introduced her as one of the celebrities. I ran and turned over some tables. It was ugly. But I wanted to get my picture taken with Carol Dweck. I love the book Mindset. It is fantastic. Randy Allen, coach at Highland Park in Texas, has 2 little books. Coaching by the Book and Coaching Character. I mentioned Joe Ehrmann before, Inside Out Coaching, Jeffrey Marks, Season of Life. I think those are very, very important books. Jeffrey Duke does a series called 3D Coaching as well. And I'm like everybody else. I think Urban's book's awesome. I think The Winner's Manual, Jim Tressel, one of the best just basic information books about how to be a football coach that I've ever read. I think he did a great job with that. The John Wooden books, I mean, what unbelievable information there is there. And I like the other stuff I like business books. I like reading about Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, guys that are at the best at what they do. Anything Jim Collins writes, I'm going to read. He's the one that wrote
Good to Great.
Good to Great.
Yeah.
And Built to Last and How the Mighty Fall. I read How the Mighty Fall. We'd won 3 championships in a row here, and I read that book, How the Mighty Fall, right after that, because I wanted to just make sure that we were doing everything in our power not to have that fall. Malcolm Gladwell, I love to read Malcolm Gladwell's books, and he just has a different way of thinking that I think sort of helps me. The Stephen Levitt's Freakonomics, I enjoy that kind of stuff. But about any of those, Butler Way, I enjoyed that. It's not written by Brad, but it's written by some people about him. But I find that really some interesting things. Obviously, anything that is written about Belichick, I'm going to read. I think between Coach Saban, Coach Meyer, and Coach Belichick, about the 3 best there are out there. But I would encourage people to really try to find that Tony Mason coaching coaches, especially if they're a young head coach or a potentially young head coach. And I think that's really important.
Coach, I'll try to find that and see if there's a link to somewhere out there. I'll put it in our show notes. You mentioned a coaching clinic and taking something from a coaching clinic. So what was it you did take from that coaching clinic with the women's basketball coach?
Oh, Sherry, before every practice, Sherry has their girls it's not before practice, but it's like after you do sort of your warm-up, walk-through type stuff that they do in basketball, and I don't know anything about basketball. It wasn't right when they get there. It's after they do a few drills and things like that, they circle up. They get in what they call the circle, and all the girls put their arms around each other, and Sherry basically gives them a little speech about why they're there. What is their purpose for being there that day? And I thought it was such a great idea. We adapted it to what we call 3 minutes. And we'll do it usually somewhere around periods 3 to 6. And we'll blow the whistle 3 times. And when the kids hear the whistle blows 3 times, they run to the middle of the field. They put their arms around each other. And our offensive coach will present a 1-minute thought for the day. Our defense coach does 1 minute. And I do 1 minute on the theme usually I talk about the theme for the week. Because we have a weekly theme and a yearly theme. And we call it 3 minutes, and I think it sort of gives us, why are we here? Because I think that a lot of times kids might ask themselves if we don't tell them, why are we here? And so we try to get every day. Basically, we play on Friday, so we do that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We do 3 minutes. We blow the whistle, 1, 2, tweet, 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 and we get up there and we talk about it. That's what we learned. That's what I learned listening to Sherry. There's some other good stuff Sherry did as well. We go to clinics and we'll implement it. We try to put it in exactly the same way. I went to San Angelo, learned the outside zone. We put the bucket steps in. We put, everything. We used his terminology. He was nice enough to send us film. And I'm talking, this is 1986. This was cutting edge stuff, or 87, somewhere in there. And I think it helped us win. We put the outside zone in immediately. We went to Nebraska one time when Milt Tennifer was there. Milt was there a long time, great offensive line coach, one of the best guys ever. He just passed recently. He was awesome to us. But we put in the counter. They were just experimenting with the GT counter play. That's how old I am. They're at Nebraska that year. In fact, they were pulling the guard and the slot back because they didn't think they could pull tackles. And then, of course, the rest is history about that. But there's a lot of stuff going to clinic that we do. What we like to do now is just bring somebody to our place. We can fly them into Fort Smith, pay them good money, and we have them captured there for a day and then fly them back in the afternoon. And I invite my buddies from the area. And I learned, and when you live in the city, a lot of these coaches don't have anything to do at night. Some of them want to run around, but some of them aren't running around. And I figured out when I lived in Oklahoma City and Tulsa that I'd find out when these guys are coming to do their spring recruiting, and we'd just do an impromptu clinic. And, we've been lucky. I had Les Miles, Mike Gundy, Mark Hudson, Charlie North, Mike Stoops. We've had some great, great coaches just while they're doing spring recruiting. I said, hey, why don't you make us your last stop, and we'll get some pizza and sodas, and we'll talk football for a couple hours. And, we've had some awesome guys do that. And then later on, I've gotten to the point where I try to watch the bowl games and figure out who's doing something that we want to learn more about, and then try to get try to bring somebody in that knows what they're doing. And the last 2 years, we've ended up, instead of bringing someone in, we went to Auburn 2 years ago and basically just did a RPO clinic for our buddies. And last year we went to North Gwinnett High School with Bob Spire there in Atlanta and just did an RPO clinic. We just spent 2 days talking about nothing basically but RPO stuff. But I think that it's just a lot more focused, and it's a great way to learn, and plus it's a great way to network with some awesome people. And Bobby Bentley, who's now in South Carolina, has helped us along the way, and it's been a good thing for us. But I'm going to try to I've had Todd Dodge come to Greenwood, Arkansas twice, and I believe it's for good money. But when you look at the amount of money, if I take a staff, Dallas or Tulsa, to a clinic, and then if I take all that money and give it to somebody to spend a day of their life with us in Greenwood, Arkansas, I think it ends up being cheaper and it's better. And that's one of the things that I've tried to do. Todd Dodge has been up here twice. We had Chad Morris up here when he was still at Stephenville, or I guess he was at Lake Travis by the time we had Chad up here. But those two guys have gone on to do pretty well. But I just try to find guys that like talking ball and get them in here and try to wear them out on the board.
Coach, what's something as we head into clinic season that you're excited to learn about now?
Well, I'm still looking for the elusive answer. What do you do against press man when you have an RPO call? We've gone to clinics. I've gone to Auburn, Alabama, and I've gone to Atlanta, Georgia, and I haven't found a great answer for that. I've heard some answers, but I don't have great answers. But I think the main thing is we're trying to we have been 10 personnel 99.9% of the time, and I think, and we this last year we were horrendous on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, and just atrocious. And I think what we're going to see or explore is maybe becoming more multiple, maybe some 11, 20. I see it as a way to incorporate more people onto the field. But if we had had a whole lot of 6'2" to 6'5", 190 to 230 pound guys, we'd have probably been doing it earlier. But we're probably like everybody else. We don't have a whole lot of those guys. But I'm thinking about we've run the ball very, very well. But I just think that we've got to obviously we have to get better in 3rd and shorts and 4th and shorts. And I think instead of putting that in like day 3 of our spring practice, that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to go down and go 3rd and 1 and get it on and figure out a physical approach to making 1 yard, because I love the spread. I love 10 personnel. I like the math. I might like it even better. I mean, we like empty as well, but we just have not been what we need to be on 3rd and short and 4th and short. And so I'm excited to go look at some things and get better. And I'm always looking to do things to improve our program. And I'm going to Orlando in a couple of weeks to the USA football deal there they're having in conjunction with the Pro Bowl, and listen to some great guys. And I know a couple guys that are going to be there, high school coaches as well, and try to pick their brain and get with them and learn some things there as well.
Coach, this is a tough question for a lot of guys because we're so passionate about the game, and we could put 24 hours into it if people would allow us to have that kind of time. But how do you create the balance you need with other things in your life like family and health?
Well, I don't do a very good job of that, frankly. I have the biggest mistake, and my kids are now in college. I had 3 kids, and they're now in college. And I think the worst thing, I had time, because when you're the head coach, the huge advantage of being a head coach is that you work when you want to. And when you work for somebody, then you work when the man wants you to work. And so I was always fortunate in my kids were growing up. I got to sort of pick and choose what I went to and what I didn't go to. And you end up missing things. My kids played volleyball. My girls played volleyball and soccer. My son played soccer, football, and basketball. So I missed some stuff. But I was able to go to a lot more things than maybe a guy was able to attend, go 9 to 5. I heard one of your guys the other day say you got to be where your feet are. And if I made my biggest mistake at all would have been I should have stayed at the office longer if I would have been more where my feet were when I was home, because it's hard, especially I think for head coaches, to turn it off and turn it on, because there's always something out there. There's always some kind of trouble and turmoil and an issue that's going to cause you some sleepless nights and some issues, and it's hard to go watch a sixth grader play volleyball and not have your brain rolling over and over. If not a parent issue, it's what are you going to call on third and fourth? What are you going to do about this coach who did this or something like that? And I think that, as like I say, one of your guys I heard as I was listening to your podcast, one of the podcasts, you got to be where your feet are.
Mm-hmm.
If I could go back and do it, which unfortunately we can't, I would be I would do my work at the office, and when I got home, I would be home. I would do a better job of keeping my brain occupied with what's important, what's in front of me now. But it's hard, and I haven't done a great job. In 2000, I ran a marathon. I mean, I trained. My wife's a runner. She runs 8 miles a day. I was in pretty good shape then. I did run a marathon. I finished it. The last 2 miles, dodged traffic, but I did all right, and I finished it. And then I sort of went back through my fat stage and lazy stage and didn't work the way that I should. And now I'm back on it. I've been on it for about the last 3 months. Where I walk or something. And the beauty of it is, and technology, again, plays a part, is that I can listen to books. I can read books while I'm walking. Now, how great is that? Or I can listen to a podcast. I've listened to every podcast you've had up, because I try to walk for 40 minutes to an hour every day, and every one of the Keith Grabowski podcasts I've listened to. Some of them I'm even going back into the second time, because it's, I think Brian Kane refers to auto university. Just anytime you get in the car, put on some kind of motivational message or a podcast or an audio book or something like that. And I've really taken that to heart. And just let's not waste time. I guess it's probably part that I'm getting older too, and that time becomes even more precious when you realize just how important it is. And let's learn, man. Let's not just have mindless stuff. And I don't think it means that you don't relax and you don't recuperate. And I get all that, recharge the batteries and all that. But I'm just saying, if I'm going to be driving a car, or if I'm going to be walking down the road trying to get some exercise, I'm making my brain smarter. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But I haven't done a great job, to tell you the truth, and I think I think people would tell you that. But it's being present, is the other term that I hear the gurus use from time. I just need to be present where my presence is, and I did not do a great job of that. It's hard.
Coach, we'll keep putting out those great podcasts so you have a reason to walk, and we'll help you with that health. So, Coach, what do you see as some major concerns right now for the future of our game, and what ideas do you have that address those concerns?
The elephant in the room is the concussions. I think this is my guess, is that when the research all comes full circle, it's not going to probably be quite as bad as they think it might be, but it's out there. It's a perception, and perception is reality to a lot. And to me, we as a profession, we have to embrace change. We have to embrace change, because if we don't embrace change, we're going to lose our sport. It will change drastically. But I'm like probably all the other old guys out there. I don't like the way they enforce the rules, blah, blah, blah. But it really doesn't matter, because the big picture is so much more important. We got to make it safe for our kids. We got to make it safe for our kids, as safe as possible. We cannot do it without risk, but we can do it and minimize the risk. We got to figure that out, and that means we might have to find different ways to teach tackling in practice. We have to find different ways to teach just to practice in general, so that we're not banging our heads against each other quite so much. And if it makes us less tough and less physical, then that's something I just think we have to. I'm not saying throw your hands up and accept, but I mean if it's going to save the game, I think that's really what we're up against. But I've told people when I had a chance to talk at clinics, we have to embrace this. It's not a matter of accepting it, getting along with it, or just following the letter of the law. It's embrace it. Let's embrace change. Let's welcome. Hey, we've got doctors and neurologists and these physicians that know so much more than we know, and when they tell us things that we can do to make things better and to make it safer for our kids, we gotta embrace it. My son is a sophomore in college, and he's expressed an interest in becoming a coach, and I want him to be able to have the same opportunities that I had, if not better. But if we don't embrace change, then I'm really, really afraid of what could happen in the future. I just think we have to be smart and look. And it's like Coach Little told me all those years ago, and that I mentioned before. We got to see the big picture. We have to see the big picture. Embrace change, and that doesn't mean it doesn't necessarily say like it, but I think we have to see where we're at. And it's like they said in the movie Saving Private Ryan, this is what we have to convince parents of. And I'll never forget, most people saw the movie, remember the scene when Tom Hanks is shot, and they've made all this sacrifice for that one. He says, be worthy. Be worthy. And I think what we have to do as coaches is make sure the game's worthy of the risk that the kid taking to play it. We have to be worth it. We have to make it worthwhile. We have to show mamas and daddies that the game is worth it and that it's worthy of the risk. And we got to make sure that we do everything in our power to make sure that they understand that. But I think that's, that the heat issue is an issue. We just got it. If they say that the guidelines are what they are, then just follow the guidelines. We have no possible answer when horrible things happen when we haven't done our job. I mean, it happened about 80 miles from here 5 years ago. We lost a young man playing football during the summertime, and it's just, it's so horrific. We got to always say, now, is it really worth pressing that envelope in that, or do we wait a couple hours, or do we take our shoulder pads off and just do something different? Just be able to adapt. He's like Coach Little, see the big picture, and I think that's what we have to do as coaches.
Coach, here's the final question, and you've had a lot of success. Like I said, there's a lot of guys who you've been influential to, and you shared some great things with us today. But what's the one thing you'd point to as giving your team the winning edge?
I think that the number one thing that we've been able to be successful is that we are consistent. We have expectations that are not going to vary a lot, whether we're on a 50-game winning streak like we did a couple years ago or if we're on a 2-game losing streak. We're going to have the same standards. We're going to have the same expectations. We're going to have the same mentality. And my goal is that you could go out to practice and not be able to tell whether we're playing the biggest game of the year or theoretically the easiest game of the year. I think over time we are consistent in what we do, and we're going to work hard, and I think that our kids believe in the system and that they work harder than any team in the state of Arkansas. And whether that's true or not is not important. The important thing is that they believe it. And when we go out to play the game, we believe that we deserve to win. And I think over time, having a consistent approach and an approach that doesn't waver based upon last week or last month or 10 years ago or tomorrow is the key. And I hear these and read it in books and everything, and that it's just, we really try to take the next play approach. The next play is the only play you can do anything about. So that we try to make our focus not in the rearview mirror, not in the future, but just right there in the present day. I used Randy Jackson's idea there at Grapevine. I just put a big old question mark on every one of their off-season T-shirts. So they're all wearing this big question mark, and every day I'm going to ask them a question. What did you, and our question yesterday was, what did you do with today? What did you do with today? We just finished our workout. You just went through it. What did you do with it? And every day I'm going to have a question for them, and just always trying to push and prod and find those buttons that will get them, make them better players and buy in a little bit more.
Coach, how can our listeners connect with you?
I have a web page that they might enjoy some of the stuff. I do blogs from time to time. I'm not real prolific when it comes to that, but that's www.coachrickjones.com. They can look for some of the stuff there. And it's been a big honor to let me on your podcast. You have some of my heroes have gone before me, like Randy Jackson and Jim McNally, Herb Hand, and guys, some really, really Dub Maddox, some really, really great coaches. Brent Eckley.
Well, those guys think very highly of you as well. And Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time, being on the show, sharing all the things you did with us. And I look forward to seeing you in Orlando.
Thanks again for listening to the Coach and Coordinator podcast. Happy New Year to you. Best of luck and best wishes for a great 2022. Follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski and follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com.